Kuṇḍalakesā Nikāya, the Minor Discourses, Thērīgāthā, verses of the Arahant Bhikkhunis, Pañcakanipāta, the Book of 5 Verses. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Therīgāthā 5.1 Aññatara Therī. Since going forth and throughout these 25 years after ordaining, I don't recall ever experiencing, and not even for a snap of the fingers, a true peaceful moment of serenity taking place in my heart. So while at the mercy of the senses, the mind was overrun in total chaos, with passionate lust exuding from every orifice. Thus I was hopelessly flailing my arms about in desperation, when I rushed back to the nunnery. It was then where, in my utter despair, I went approaching a bhikkhuni who inspired much faith in me. It was her who showed me the way by teaching me the Dhamma, along with the aggregates, the sense spheres, as well as the dhatus for the constituent parts of existence. Then, on listening to the Dhamma she taught me, I went and sat in one position, unmoved and with dedication. Now I know all my past existences. The divine eye is truly purified in me, for now I can clearly see. Knowing the heart and minds of others by looking deeply into them, my divine ear is purified as well. For I have indeed applied the paths to success. Hence, the psychic powers I now do possess. But above all, the destruction of all the heart's contaminants is truly achieved. And by having realized the 6 supernormal higher knowledges, I declare the Buddha's dispensation I have now rightfully fulfilled. These were the verses spoken by the Venerable Aññatara Therī. Thērīgāthā 5.2 Vimāla Therī. Enchanted by my own looks, completely smitten by my attractive figure and beauty, drinking up all that youth could ever provide for me, I kept scoffing at all others, whom I considered absolutely inferior to me. Dressed up in my finest to seduce, irresistibly lethal in my attractive traits that were designed to provoke and beguile all those who saw or glanced at me. So every day I laid my trap and waited, much like a hunter for his prey, as I stood there at the courtesan's door, teasing those who came to sneak a peek. I revealed just enough of my privates to drive them mad, playing with them with my elaborate tricks and cunningly staged deceptions. I kept laughing on seeing those foolish, drooling men who became enchanted with my illusions I had conjured up, as they fell, one and all, again and again. But now that ex-courtesan lives a life that's unrecognizable from the one she once lived, as she goes on every day collecting her alms food, with a head that is cleanly shaven, wearing her double outer robes, and on finding herself a quiet place, she goes and sits at the roots of a shaded tree, where she meditates and attains to the state that's absent of all thinking. So with all yokes that once shackled and bound me up, whether to lives that were human or divine, all of them now are torn to shreds and utterly destroyed, for I have now obliterated the asavas of the heart, and thus am cooled and finally quenched of my thirst. These were the verses spoken by the Venerable Vimāla Theri. Therigatha 5.3 Sīhā Theri. Because of my wrongly placed attention, I unwisely allowed the mind to get plunged in passionate pursuits, while seeking to gain from sensual pleasures. Due to my arrogance, I dwelled in perpetual agitation, lacking a moment's rest. Where the mind was out of control and undisciplined, this itself was my state in the past. Suffocatingly overwhelmed by the heart's defilements, I kept running after what I perceived to be beautiful. Meanwhile, no peace or release did my heart gain from all that craziness, trying to get satisfied by rushing blindly, led by lustful thoughts that were the ones in charge, really, pulling the foolish mind this way and that. That's how I ended up so malnourished and emaciated, while discolored with a yellow complexion for 7 years, suffering with many afflictions, and experiencing such terrible pain, where I had no rest, whether day or night. So, while in that state of utter desperation, I picked up a long rope and headed deep into the forest, having planned to hang myself and end my terrible misery, rather than to stick around or go back to living the low life I knew so well. And having tied a tough knot upon a sturdy branch, I made a firm noose, and just when I placed it around my neck, right before I jumped off and killed myself, my mind was fully released. These were the verses spoken by the Venerable Sīhā Theri. Therigatha 5.4 Sundarīnandā Theri. Carefully observe this filthy infestation of impurities, O Nanda. This diseased body that's always marinating in its rotten juices. And as you straighten up your attention by bringing the heart into focused serenity, become totally settled and unified. Cultivate your meditative practice while looking deeply at the disgusting features of this very body. For as the body truly is, so you must see it to be. Just like the case is with others over there, so it is with this one over here, with its ruthlessly vile stench wafting everywhere. Meanwhile, for the blind fool, who knows or sees not much else, it still happens to be a cause for delight in the rising of passions. Contemplating in this manner, day and night, tireless in my endeavor to reflect and probe thus, I was able to gain, on my own, the deep wisdom necessary. Developing the penetrating vision, I was able to finally pierce through and see. So while heedfully investigating at all times, by re-establishing wise, radical attention in me in regards to every type of experience I went on witnessing, I was finally able to clearly see this body, both internally and externally, as it keeps arising from moment to moment, and thus comes to be. It was on witnessing within me the resulting state of dispassion, unavoidably, that I became truly disgusted with the body. Right then, I no longer saw myself identified with it any more. Thus, by remaining vigilant, I'm finally quenched and disentangled at last, for I now know the true meaning of being at peace. These were the verses spoken by the Venerable Sundarīnandā Theri. Therigatha 5.5 Nanduttarā Theri. Fire I used to call sacred and worshipped, as well as the moon, the sun, and the devas too. And whenever I would find myself near a body of water, I used to therein plunge into, blindly believing in the power of those cleansing rituals. Thus, by engaging in so many rituals and rites, I even shaved off my head and undertook many vows, including sleeping on the cold ground with nothing on it to soften its feel, while abstaining from eating anything at all at nights. Torturing the body was thus, for me, living the holy life. Meanwhile, however, I enjoyed putting on makeup and eyeliner, while applying all kinds of perfumes and oils upon my body, in a continuous drive to beautify myself, and thus working to attract the attention I craved constantly. So my real master was none other than this body, really, whom I served faithfully. Being thus afflicted by the passions that burned with lust for sense pleasures, the gratification of which I thought was my purpose for being. However, the futility of such craziness soon became too clear, as I developed strong faith and confidence in my heart, as a result of which I went forth, leaving all that I had identified with in the past behind, Verily, on seeing the body as it truly is, then both desire and lust for sense pleasures simply were eradicated and are now destroyed for good. Finally, the link to future becomings is totally obliterated, along with all longings or yearnings I may have once had for some type of birth. Cut off at last are the shackles that had me bound. Now the heart has finally attained to the ultimate state of peace. These were the verses spoken by the Venerable Nanduttarā Theri. Therigatha 5.6 Mittākāḻī Theri. It was through my strong faith that I left everything and went forth, leaving behind me the familiar life of a householder. So I went wandering here and there, but on tasting the flavor of fame and acquisitions, I became hooked and turned this holy life into their lame pursuit, as I eagerly sought after possessions and renown. So, by neglecting and giving up the highest aim, I, instead, went after the low-lying fruits of worldly gain and empty fame. Under the complete dominance of defilements of the heart, I remained far removed from ever knowing or genuinely tasting the goal of what is meant to be living the life of a monastic. Then, one day, while sitting in my kuti, suddenly it hit me. Oh my! The life I'm leading has nothing to do whatsoever with living a life that is holy. For I truly am treading on and practicing the wrong path itself, having lived out my days in the service of the pursuit of craving and not much else. There's not much of life that is left for me, as I'm run over by aging and sickness of all kinds. Much like a dilapidated old fortress, I feel and see this body itself coming apart into pieces by the incessant blows of old age. So there's not a moment to lose for me here, for I simply don't have the luxury of wasting any more time by remaining heedless. And by looking carefully at all things and experiences as they are, I saw them as nothing other than mere aggregates appearing and disappearing. Thus I arose and stood with a heart that is fully released. I have now indeed reached the end and very completion of the Buddha's dispensation. These were the verses spoken by the Venerable Mittākāḻī Theri. Therigatha 5.7 Sakulā Theri. While still living at home, a mother and a housewife I was. On listening to the words of a Bhikkhu teaching us the Dhamma one certain day, suddenly I saw the Dhamma, so utterly stainless and unblemished in its vibrant beauty. I attained to Nibbana, that is none other than the deathless itself. Walking away from my son and daughter, along with all that I owned, with possessions and much gain from grain. Without ever looking back, I just left it all to them. And by shaving off my hair, I simply went forth into homelessness. Then, as a nun still in training, I practiced and developed the mind until I attained to the path, whereby I relinquished lust and hatred altogether, as well as the rest of the 5 fetters too. And once I received my bhikkhuni ordination, I began to clearly see my past lives as well, through the cultivation of the divine eye, that's truly stainless in its purity and totally unspoiled when fully developed to its perfection. And by coming to directly see how the habitual drives, the sankhara, were in fact not things belonging to me at all, there was no point in carrying them any further with me any more. So I abandoned them completely. And now I'm truly cooled at last in my release, having attained to the state of extinction that is Nibbana supreme. These were the verses spoken by the Venerable Sakulā Theri. Therigatha 5.8 Soṇā Theri. With this bundle of form called a body, I gave birth to a total of 10 sons. But then, with the burden of years weighing down heavily on me, I approached a bhikkhuni for answers to satisfy me. It was her who showed me the way by teaching me the Dhamma, along with the aggregates, the sense spheres, as well as the dhatus 4, the constituent parts of existence. Moved deeply by what she taught me, I became inspired and decided to shave my head as I went forth into homelessness. Thus, while still just a female trainee in the nunnery, I was to see my past lives with such clarity, along with the places I have lived, through the cultivation of the divine eye in me that's truly purified and totally stain-free. Now, while meditating on the signless, my concentrated focus is well placed and at one with its unified serenity, which is how, in the blink of an eye, I became fully quenched. The moment I gave up all manner of grasping and holding on. Fully understood are now the aggregates numbering 5. And although I still stand while supported by them, they, on the other hand, are left without any, with nothing underneath as their support, you see. So there you have it, you miserable, wretched old thing called aging, you. For there's not going to be any more lives for me in the future at all, nor for you to ever come and greet me, nor to give me a taste of you. These were the verses spoken by the Venerable Soṇā Theri. Therigatha 5.9 Bhaddā Kuṇḍalakesā Theri. Covered in mud from head to toe, and with my curly hairs pulled out from their very roots, that's what I foolishly thought made me a true practitioner. while wandering the land with a single robe to cover me. So deluded was my thinking that, while not recognizing what should be blamed, I used to go around finding fault in things which were, however, truly blameless after all. It was at that time, in fact, after coming out of my day's seclusion, when my feet and heart took me up to the Gijha peak, that brilliant late afternoon, where I saw the pure and spotless Buddha himself, sitting there at the root of the noble gathering of the entire Bhikkhu Sangha. I couldn't help but fall on my knees as I bowed in tears in the presence of the dustless one, with my hands in Anjali. "Come, Bhaddā," were the sweet words the Master spoke to me, and that itself was the completion of my ordination ceremony. Throughout Anga and Magadha, my feet have long carried me, as well as to the vast regions of Vajji, Kasi, and the Kosalan countries, whereby I survived and carried on the practice, by blamelessly eating the alms food offered to me in all those places for more than 50 years already. Truly immeasurable indeed is the store of merits now accrued for that lay student who gave so open-handedly by offering his generous gift of robes to Bhaddā, who is rightfully released and truly freed from all things that bind. These were the verses spoken by the Venerable Bhaddā Kuṇḍalakesā Theri. Therigatha 5.10 Paṭācārā Theri. Relying on the proper returns for their hard work, young men vigorously apply themselves, plowing the fields and sowing seeds into the freshly tilled soil, while providing for their wives and children. They make their living, accumulating wealth, while securing a future for their families. As for me, I am fully dedicated and grounded in the purity of my virtue, constantly working while applying myself with what the teacher has taught me, never allowing myself to get lazy, nor to become restless in my efforts. So why in the world am I still missing the mark by not tasting the deathless, nor attaining to extinction myself? Then it was while I was washing my feet, while observing the flow of water, while washing and carrying away the dirt from me, as it moved from its high point to the lower depressions into the ground. Right then, I noticed how the heart became collected, becoming utterly still and without much fuss or strife, just like a noble stallion obeying its master. It came to a full stop. So it was, that very same night, when right before bedtime, as I entered my kuti, while carrying the oil lamp with me, after checking my bed, I decided to sit for a moment or two on its edge. And as I still held the needle of the wick in my hand, slowly lowering it into the oil, Suddenly, with the extinguishing of the lamp, the heart itself was finally liberated from all its darkness, much like the lamp, too, was quenched right there in my lap. These were the verses spoken by the Venerable Paṭācārā Theri. Therigatha 5.11 Tiṁsamattā Theri. 30 Bhikkhunis attaining freedom together. Relying on the proper returns for their hard work, young men vigorously apply themselves by grinding down the precious grain, turning it into fine powder, providing for their wives and children, and making their living, accumulating wealth for themselves while securing a future for their families. You too must constantly work by applying yourselves with the same level of intensity, just like them. For if you do put into practice what the teacher has taught, you most certainly will be glad you did and never regret doing it. So don't let a moment slip by you. As you return to your kutis, hastily wash the dirt off your feet, and quickly go and sit somewhere quiet and meditate wholeheartedly, never letting yourself to idle aimlessly. Thus, by keeping your unstrained focus squarely upon staying with the peaceful concentration that is the serenity of the heart, you too then will surely be practicing what the Buddha has been teaching. Being thus moved deeply by her powerfully inspiring words, the Bhikkhunis, numbering 30, engaged with renewed efforts, eagerly applying themselves with the teaching given to them by Paṭācārā, whereby, just as she advised, on their return to their individual kutis, they hastily washed the dirt off their feet, and quickly went and sat somewhere quiet, meditating wholeheartedly, never letting themselves to idle aimlessly, as advised. They kept their unstrained focus squarely upon staying with the peaceful concentration that is the serenity of the heart. Thus, they indeed practiced, and so rightfully, what the Buddha has instructed and taught. And as they sat diligently, it so happened that during the first watch of the night, those bhikkhunis began remembering their past lives. Then, during the middle watch of the night, the divine eye became clear and utterly purified in them. But it was during the last watch of the night, when they totally destroyed and smashed into bits the mountain of painful ignorance that had imprisoned their hearts. And by rising up from their seats, the group of 30 nuns all went and bowed at her feet, while stating, "What you taught us is now done indeed, and fully complete." Much like the 30+ devas in Sakka's company, who come as vanquishers by presenting themselves truly undefeated, bowing as they did respectfully to their teacher, Indra, the king of the gods, so do we, having now become masters of the 3 super knowledges, have come bowing at your feet. For truly we have indeed destroyed in full the contaminants of the heart. These were the verses spoken to the Venerable Paṭācārā by those 30 venerable Arahant Bhikkhunis, the Tiṁsamattā Theris. Therigatha 5.12 Candā Therī. I was in such a poor and sorry state, being left a widow and without any sons or children to take care of me. I had no loved ones, friends, or even relatives that would come calling on me, let alone to offer me a helping hand, which is why I was left with no support at all, not having any food to eat, no shelter, nor any clothes to wear or cover this body. So I did the only thing I could, which was to find myself a bowl and a wooden staff to lean against, as I went begging from family to family. Thus, for 7 years straight, I went wandering, but found no sense of security anywhere. Meanwhile, being scorched by the burning heat throughout the day, and freezing during the cold winter nights. It was then that I came across a bhikkhuni, walking on her alms round, trying to obtain her requisites of food and drink. I decided to approach her, and then I made the request, "Please, I want to be ordained like you and go forth into homelessness." It was Paṭācārā who, in her immense compassion for me, decided to ordain me, as she gave me the going forth. Thereupon she inspired, encouraged, and heartened me through her constant guidance, stirring in me the motivation and urgency to fulfill the task by attaining the goal of the holy life. Thus, being deeply moved by her teaching and her indelibly kind words, I practiced every day, striving and doing my very best to complete the great task, which I was able to accomplish at last. Truly, my teacher's guidance and patience in me have truly paid off greatly, for I am now a master of the 3 super knowledges myself, having utterly destroyed all the heart's contaminants and obliterated them at their very roots. These were the verses spoken by the Venerable Candā Therī. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.